Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a story that sounds like it's ripped straight from a modern-day techno thriller, but it actually happened way back in the 1990s. We're talking about the world's first ever digital carjacking. Most of us think of car hacking as a recent threat, something that came with smart keys, Bluetooth, and internet-connected dashboards. We see it in movies like The Fate of the Furious, where hackers turn an entire city's vehicles into a zombie car army. But the truth is, the seeds for this kind of digital mayhem were planted long before Wi-Fi was a household name. To understand how this was even possible, we need to go back in time to the early days of automotive technology. The 90s were a fascinating era. We had dial-up internet, chunky cell phones, and cars that were just starting to get smart. One of the most groundbreaking innovations of the time was the emergence of telematics systems. Think of them as the great-grandparents of the connected car features we have today. One of the pioneers in this field was a company that offered a subscription service for vehicle security and remote assistance. It was revolutionary. If your car was stolen, you could call a service center and they could track its location using GPS. They could even send a signal to the car to disable the engine, making it impossible for the thief to restart it. For a fee, you could also have them remotely unlock your doors if you locked your keys inside. It felt like the future had arrived. This system relied on a combination of GPS for location and cellular technology to send commands to a small computer installed in the vehicle. It was a closed proprietary network, which at the time seemed incredibly secure. Who could possibly interfere with it? Well, that's where our story takes a dark turn. The system, while innovative, had a weakness. It was a flaw in the code or a vulnerability in the network in the way we think of hacking today. The vulnerability was human. The protagonists of our story, or rather, the antagonists, weren't sophisticated black hat hackers hiding in a basement, surrounded by monitors. They were disgruntled former employees of the company that installed these telematics systems. These individuals had been fired, but they left with something incredibly valuable: insider knowledge. They knew exactly how the system worked, the procedures, the commands, and most importantly, the loopholes. They didn't need to crack complex encryption or breach firewalls. They had a much simpler and far more terrifying method. They allegedly compiled a list of customers and their vehicle identification numbers. More critically, they knew the specific command codes that the central service center used to communicate with the cars. Their plan was chillingly simple. They would target vehicles, not by physically breaking into them, but by digitally taking control. From a distance, using their knowledge of the cellular command system, they could begin to manipulate the cars of unsuspecting drivers. Imagine this: you're driving down the highway, minding your own business, listening to the radio. Suddenly, your car doors lock and unlock on their own. The horn starts blaring intermittently. The headlights flash on and off. You'd probably think your car's electrical system was failing. You'd be confused, maybe a little scared, but you wouldn't suspect that someone, somewhere, was doing this to you on purpose. But that was just the beginning. These former employees didn't just want to scare people. They wanted to exert total control. Their ultimate weapon was the engine kill switch feature. This was the same feature designed to stop car thieves in their tracks. But in the wrong hands, it could be used to stop an innocent person, anywhere, anytime. And that's exactly what happened. The first documented cases began to surface. Drivers reported bizarre and terrifying experiences. One person was driving on a busy street when their car's engine suddenly died, leaving them stranded in the middle of traffic. Another had their car repeatedly disabled in their own driveway, trapping them. The victims were completely baffled. They took their cars to mechanics, who couldn't find anything wrong. The vehicles seemed perfectly fine, only to act up again at random. The pattern was always the same: a series of strange electronic glitches, followed by the engine being completely disabled. The victims were helpless. They were being digitally stalked and harassed, and they didn't even know it. It took some time for law enforcement and the telematics company to piece together what was happening. At first, the reports were treated as isolated incidents of mechanical failure. But as more and more customers with the same security system reported the same bizarre set of problems, a horrifying pattern began to emerge. This wasn't a glitch, it was sabotage. The investigation eventually led them back to the fired employees. The motive: a mix of revenge against their former employer and, in some cases, extortion. They had figured out that they could hold people's cars hostage. They would disable a vehicle and then, through various means, demand payment to restore its function. It was a new kind of crime for a new digital age: carjacking without ever laying a hand on the car. The legal system was completely unprepared for this. How do you prosecute a crime like this? Is it vandalism? Is it theft? Is it assault? The laws at the time were written for physical crimes. The concept of someone remotely interfering with a vehicle's core functions was science fiction. This case became a landmark. It was the first time the courts had to grapple with the idea of a digital attack on a physical object that could endanger human lives. The perpetrators were eventually caught and prosecuted, setting a legal precedent for a type of crime that would become all too common in the decades to follow. The incident was a massive wake-up call for the entire automotive industry. It proved that as cars became more connected, they also became more vulnerable. The security of these early telematics systems relied on the idea that no one outside the company would know how to access them. It was security through obscurity, and this case demonstrated spectacularly why that is a terrible security model. In the aftermath, companies began to invest more heavily in securing their systems. They started implementing better authentication protocols, encrypting commands, and creating stricter access controls for employees. They learned the hard way that the human element is often the weakest link in any security chain. So, what can we learn from this incredible piece of history? First, it shows that the threat of vehicle hacking is not new. It's been evolving for as long as we've been putting computers in cars. Second, it highlights the immense responsibility that comes with creating connected technology. When you create a system that can remotely control a 2-ton metal box traveling at high speeds, you have to assume that someone, somewhere, will try to abuse it. Today's cars are infinitely more complex. They have dozens of computers, or ECUs, controlling everything from the brakes and steering to the infotainment system. They're connected to the internet, to our phones, to satellites. This connectivity gives us amazing features, but it also creates a much larger attack surface for potential hackers. The lessons learned from this first digital carjacking in the 90s are more relevant now than ever. Security can't be an afterthought. It has to be built into the DNA of the vehicle from the ground up. We need robust encryption, secure authentication, and constant vigilance to stay ahead of those who would seek to do harm. This story serves as a powerful reminder that with every technological leap forward, we must also consider the new vulnerabilities we might be creating. The future of automotive security depends on learning the lessons from its past. What do you guys think? Does knowing this story change how you feel about the technology in your own car? Let me know down in the comments. It's a fascinating topic and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into tech history, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one.